This lesson is going to cover midpoint formula and distance formula. These are very useful when you know an angle that is not cannot be found by Pythagorean theorem, and you need to find a midway point or halfway there. So in the real world, maybe if you were driving from here to Charlotte and you need to know the midway point on a map, you could find two coordinates of here in Charlotte and then find the midpoint using this method. So really what a midpoint is just the halfway point. So we're going to take 2 points, maybe this is the beginning and the end point, and we're going to look at the x's and we're going to find the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So basically you have the x's, and we're going to go ahead and label them on here. This is x1, x2, this is y1 and y2. So you add the x's together, so this ends up looking like -2 plus 6 divided by 2. And then the other point is going to be your y's added together, 5 plus a -1 divided by 2. And you simplify those down as two little points. So -2 and a +6 gives me 4 divided by 2, which gives me 2. And 5 plus a -1 gives me 4 divided by 2, which also gives me 2. So our midpoint for these 2 points is at the coordinate 2, 2. All right, let's try another one. So this one is a triangle or some type, and you have 3 points, and I want you to find the midpoint between A and B. So when we start with A and B, we're talking about just this coordinate and this coordinate. So we're going to add again the x's, so -5 plus 7 divided by 2, and then add the y's, 2 plus 7 divided by 2. And that's going to give us 2 divided by 2, which equals 1. And then 9 divided by 2, and we can leave it as 9/2. So our final answer for the midpoint of A to B is going to be 1 and 9/2. That's our final answer. And we're going to do the same thing for B to C and then C to A. So pause it, try it, and come back and check. So we can see now our midpoint for segment BC is 8 and 3/2, and our midpoint for CA is 2 and -1. And you can check your work there. All right, so now we're going to move into distance formula. So distance formula is when you're trying to find the distance between 2 points. How long is it between two? So if I'm driving from here to Charlotte and I have 2 points, the beginning point of, say, A is Statesville or Mooresville or wherever it may start at, my house, and B is in Charlotte, how far of a distance is that? So this is the distance formula. The distance equals the square root of, all over top of, the differences in the x's squared plus the differences in the y's squared. So let's fill this in. So we have to have our points that we're talking about. So we're going to look first at and call our first top one here x1, y1, x2, y2. Now it doesn't matter which one you call what, as long as if you call the top one x1, then its partner's y1, and vice versa. So you can't do one x1 up here and then the y1 in the B segment. You have to put them together, the partners. So we're going to do the distance is equal to square root of, and we're going to plug in. So our x2 is 5 minus a -2. That minus is part of the formula, so we have to remember that. A -2 squared plus y2 is 3 minus 6 squared. Now we're going to simplify. So we leave our square root symbol. 5 plus 2 gives us 7. Going to be squared. And 3 minus 6 gives us a -3 squared. Now we're going to simplify even further. Square root of 7 squared gives us 49. And -3 times a -3 gives us 9. And now we're down to 49 plus 9 inside of the radical sign. We're going to add those together. So we get D is equal to the square root of 58. And we can't simplify any further, so that would be our closest answer. The distance between point A and point B is the square root of 58. If you put it in the calculator, you're going to get a decimal that continues, so this is the most proper answer. All right, let's try another one. So this one has some complex numbers in it that you see, not really complex, but different types of numbers. So 4 square roots of 5 just means if you put the square root of 5 in your calculator and get the number that goes on forever, and then you multiply it by 4, that's what you're getting. So this is the most accurate way to write that number, but we're going to use the formula the same way. So we're still going to start out with our distance formula, square root of, and we're putting in, erase my mess here, we're putting in the differences of the x's, so x squared, squared, x subscript the x2 minus x, the first x, squared, plus y, the second y, minus the first y, squared. Now we're going to go ahead and plug it in. So d is equal to, square root symbol stays, we're going to plug in what we know. So I'm going to go ahead and label this x1, y1, x2, y2. So we're going to take the second square, so 6 square roots of 5, minus the first one, 4 square roots of 5, squared, plus the second y, minus the first y, squared. Now I'm going to simplify this down. What 6 square roots of 5 minus 4 square roots of 5 means, if I have 6 square roots of 5 and I have 4 and I take them away, I actually only have 2 square roots of 5 squared plus a negative 6 squared. Now I'm going to simplify further. If I use my calculator and I put it in 2 square roots of 5 squared, you're going to see that you get, because it undoes what it really is happening here, is 2 square roots of 5 times 2 square roots of 5. 2 times 2 is 4. I have 4. 5 times 5 is 25. I know that 25 is a perfect square, which is 5, so I have 4 times 5, which is equal to 20. So this actually simplifies down to 20, and then this simplifies to 36. So you'll have your calculator help you with this part here, but that's just kind of how it works. You'll get into that a lot more in math too. So then you go ahead and simplify down further. 20 plus 36 gives you 56. So your answer is D is equal to the square root of 56. That's your closest measurement, because it's going to give you a decimal repeating, because it's not a perfect square, so it's going to give you an irrational number, and so this is the most accurate answer. All right, so let's try a 4-star. This is where we know the distance and we need to find a missing point. So this missing point I'm calling A here. So these are my 2 points that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and label. This is x1, y1, x2, y2. And we're going to try to find our value that's missing. What is that x2's value? So we're still going to use the formula. D equals square root of the second x minus the first x squared plus the second y minus the first y squared. We're going to plug it in. So let's plug in what we know. Well, we don't know what x squared is, or the second x, so we know we're going to call it A. Minus 3 squared. The second y is 7 minus a negative 1 squared. Let's simplify further. We know that A minus 3 squared just means A minus 3 times A minus 3. Now simplify this one. 7 plus 1 is 8. That gives us 8 squared. So now, because we don't know what A is and we've got to find it, we're going to have to use some FOIL. We're going to have to multiply this out. So A times A gives us A squared minus 3A minus 3A plus 9, and then 8 squared is 64. And this is still all under a square root symbol. Now we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. So when we have like terms, we need to think about getting all the numbers together. So we have D equals the square root of, we have A squared minus 6A, and then 9 and 64 is plus 73. Now, the easiest way to do this is we know what D is. We haven't put it into this point, but we know what it is. It was given to us. So we're now going to put it in. So I'm going to erase this D, and I'm going to put in what we know. We know that it's 10. Now, I know that 10 is equal to the square root of this that we have simplified here. So I'm going to go ahead, I want to get rid of this radical sign. So to do that, I have to square this side. Well, if I square this side to get rid of the radical sign, I have to also square this side. So this ends up being 100, and then these cancel each other out. Equals a squared minus 6a plus 73. Now from that point, I can solve it like a quadratic. So minus 100 minus 100, I end up with 0 equals a squared minus 6a minus 27. Then I'm going to factor. What numbers will give me a negative 27, but then add together to get me a negative 6? Well, I know one's going to be negative and one's going to be positive. And then if I think about what they are, I'm going to have a negative 9 and a positive 3 is equal to 0. Then to solve what those would be, I set each piece equal to 0. A minus 9 equals 0, plus 9 plus 9. A could be 9, or A plus 3 equals 0, minus 3, A could be negative 3. So then if I plug them back in, I can see which one it is. All right, you have some practice to do with this one. You may have to go back and look again and use some examples as you start working, but writing the formulas down for the midpoint and the distance formula are going to be the most helpful.